Awesome. So thanks for joining us, Tim. So first, why don't you just tell us about your role and the brand overall that you oversee?
Yeah, so my role is director of operations. So obviously, I oversee all of the operations for our 72 locations, and just making sure that they're operating at a financial and operational as close to excellence as we can.
Awesome. And just tell us a little bit about your background in the industry and sort of your history working with in food.
Yeah, so I actually got a job as a bartender in 1997 to pay my way through college, where I went to school to be a golf pro, and it turns out that I was a much better bartender than I was a golfer. So I stuck in the restaurant industry and have been doing this for the last 30 plus years. And kind of just work my way up. And I always knew that I wanted to get into a role where I had a little more oversight into operations and training and development, because I knew I saw where there were opportunities to improve. And that's kind of it, long story short.
Perfect. And currently at St. Louis Bar and Grill, which MeasureUp tools are you using?
So we started off using the audit app, and we use it in a couple of different capacities. So when I first started with St. Louis about 8 years ago, everything was done on pen and paper, Excel spreadsheets, that sort of thing, and we wanted to kind of streamline that. So we did some research and hooked up with MeasureUp to streamline that process, and I mean immediately saw great results. So we implemented a couple of different checklists on that as well. So we have not just our business review, which does health and safety, measures the health of the business in a bunch of different capacities. We also have a foodborne illness report on there. During COVID, we implemented a COVID checklist. So it was a great tool for us. And then when there was the opportunity to get it down to the store level and streamline those checklists, we started to test and pilot the daily checks. And we're going to be rolling that out chain wide on starting on I think it's April 26th of this year, and hope to have our 72 locations rolled out by May the 3rd.
That sounds great, and it's a great story going, starting with the audit app and moving into daily checks, which is a common thing.
Yep.
You alluded to it a little bit, but your operational assessment process prior to MeasureUp, how does it really differ? Now working with MeasureUp, aside from obviously the paper Excel component?
Yeah, I mean, it's real-time results, right? So instead of taking your pen and paper and going home and tallying things and doing the math in your head and carrying the one and everything else, we have real results at the end of the audit, which are instantly emailed to the location. So the follow-up and the turnaround time is night and day compared to what it used to be. So obviously, if there's something that is a concern, so if it's tagged as a critical item, we want to make sure that it gets flagged immediately, and there's not 2 or 3 days that go by before that item may get addressed.
Right on. And what would you say the biggest benefit of using MeasureUp is, first for your role specifically, and then second for the entire organization?
Well, for my role specifically, it's all about time. So it allows us more time to focus on different things. And obviously in the restaurant business, things change in the blink of an eye. And so if you're tangled up in paperwork, then you're not using your time as efficiently as possible. As far as what it allows us to do for the chain, the biggest thing that I see is the year-over-year results. So it allows us to identify items that may be failing on a regular basis, and then what that allows us to do is create a strategy to really tackle those items and make sure that if there's a certain item that gets failed 3 or 4 times in the year, then we'll put a focus on it to obviously see if we can make a big change for the chain. And then in comparing store to store, so if we have stores that are doing really, really well and stores that are doing really poorly, like what categories are they struggling in, and really seeing where the differences lie.
Perfect. And what features or components are you utilizing the most? Pictures, comments, action plans. I think you mentioned some like time related stuff. So yeah, what's kind of important to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably everyone has experienced it at some point. Anyone that's ever done an audit before, anyway, where you'll make a note of something and say, hey, this is what I saw. But unless they're there to see it with you, it's really your word against theirs. What this allows us to do, I mean, the pictures are worth 1,000 words. You can take a picture of this specific item and say, this is what I saw, and there's really little argument beyond it. And then the other thing too that I really like about it is the action items. So you can go in and create an action item so that if it is something, so maybe there's some temperature abuse or something along those lines, it'll allow you to follow up immediately. So if you set an action, it needs to be followed up on within 24 hours. There's a notification that goes to the store. There's a notification that goes to our business consultant, a notification that comes to myself. And then if it gets overdue, there's a follow-up to make sure that that item does get addressed.
And does the team use the MeasureUp solution to identify company-wide problems? Does it help to reduce repeated issues? Is it showing trends, and then you can say, okay, this is the spot we're seeing something happen often. Let's kind of attack it and try and mitigate it going forward. How does that kind of play into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the MeasureUp, on the audit platform, on the dashboard, there's a section of, if you select all your locations and you select your time frame. So say, for us, we're just getting to the end of quarter 1 for 2022. What we'll do is we'll look at all of those items that failed multiple times in multiple locations, and we'll create a strategy around trying to correct those items, or we'll use that information to see if there's something that needs to change as well. So if there's multiple locations failing this task over and over again, is there a opportunity for us to look at what that might be, whether it's a step of service or something along those lines. We'll identify and see if there's a way for us to either increase the score or change it so that it's more achievable.
Perfect. And have there been any quantifiable differences that you've noticed since using MeasureUp? Any internal metrics that maybe using MeasureUp you're able to now do? And how have they kind of trended since using MeasureUp? Is there an ROI that you can place on that, or just any kind of like metrics behind it, really? Yeah.
So I mean, we typically see when what we do is we have created a scorecard on a different platform, but we use the information out of MeasureUp, and it all goes into that scorecard that allows us to rank our restaurants. And typically what we see is any of the restaurants that do well on their audits rank a lot higher on the company scorecard, and the stores that typically don't do as well are lower on that scorecard. And so that in turn allows us to identify those locations and then work with them to try and increase their overall audit scores, their scorecard score, and then, I mean, ultimately their overall profitability.
Right. And having that impact relating back to profitability, I'm sure, is one of the most important parts, especially when you're thinking ROI in the business, right?
Totally. I mean, I love this business. It's a lot of fun. The last 2 years have been challenging, to say the least, but we all do this because it's a fun job, but at the end of the day, we want to make money at it also.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And just final question, is there any general comments or feedback or, anything that you found since utilizing MeasureUp?
No, I mean, I think that it's an absolutely fantastic platform. The team and the support that I've gotten through the help desk has been unparalleled, as far as them being able to help us create our own checklists, and then the training that we've received in order to create our own checklists on the back end has been fantastic. So if you're thinking about it, I would say it's well worth the investment, and you'll see the return sooner than later.